not to marry a pastor, and then I met George. God has funny things. So anyway, then I was a PW, pastor's wife, which is a whole different level of scrutiny, shall we say. But anyway, but it was great. And so during that time, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had my own business doing marketing and fundraising, and I started connecting with a local financial firm. I was on a charity board with the executive director, and he said, you should become a financial advisor. And I realized that when I was in college, I loved my finance classes, and so I went and temped for Dean Witter, which back then was one of the big, kind of like Morgan Stanley, or, one of the big investment houses. And I was temping for my former choir director. He had switched careers. So I'm like, okay. And he gave me a phone book and said, here, start calling people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, seriously? And I decided at the end of that summer that I was not going into financial planning. And I think I blocked it from my memory because I literally forgot about it. And then when I had this opportunity, I'm like, oh yeah, I really wanted to do that, but I didn't want to do it that way. So it's been about 12 years now since my career shift, and I love what I do. I think it's all about educating and helping people to, again, I think I pick up a little bit on George's personality of there's no question that's stupid. There's no bad questions, just, because none of us are experts in everything. So I thought we would start off with just understanding a little bit more about ourselves. So don't worry, this is not like there's a pass or fail, nothing like that. It's just helping to identify your tendencies of your view of money. So we're going to try and make this as short as possible, but I couldn't pass out, I couldn't photocopy, blah, blah, blah. So if you have some kind of writing instrument, it could be a phone, it could be a piece of paper, because I'm going to put some questions up here, and what I'm going to do is have you just go through and answer them. So as quickly as possible, don't overthink it. It's one of those gut feeling, it's just a snapshot in time, you're not tied to anything, so don't worry, and you don't have to tell anybody else. I will share my money type for you at some point, but let's get started unless anyone has any questions. Okay, we're going to start with the quiz. And I realized when I was sitting in the back that this font was really small, so don't worry. Don't worry about reading it right now. So this is the, SS is this money type. We'll tell you later what they are. So we're going to go on a disagree-agree scale, 1 through 5. So I would put on your piece of paper SS, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you're just going to do whatever it was. Like when I want to buy something, I buy it right away. I agree. That's a number 5, right? So let's just make it bigger. Is that a little bit better? That's what I was doing on my computer back there during George's talk, because I'm like, oh, that's small. So any questions? You understand what you're doing? Brian, get your phone out, man. Come on, you got to take it. Everyone's taking it, right? Okay. It's where the mom in me comes out. Come on, people. So yeah, so we're going to, so the top 5 are kind of behaviors, and the bottom 5 are your beliefs about money. So again, rip through it. Maybe just kind of give me a little hand raise when you're done with this one so I can kind of have, and we can come back. So if you're the last one and you're not done, don't panic. I don't know how long it will take people to get through this. So, how are you doing? Are you done? Okay, done. Okay, done. Okay. The front row that can see. If you can't see, come up front. Is Is everyone done with the first 5? Okay, we're getting there. Okay, are we ready to move on? We'll come back to it? Okay, we'll come back to it. Okay, the next one is CC. I'm not going to tell you what it is. We'll make it bigger for you. CC. For example, I greatly consider price when I spend money. Didn't you, who is it says that was, yeah. What was your name again? Josie, yes. So just do the CC, 1 through 10. I love number 10. I get anxious, upset when splitting the bill if I have to pay more than my share, right? I didn't get a soda, and so I shouldn't have to pay that extra $2, right? Keep an eye on my clock here. Oh, yes, thank you. So, yes. So, like, you're going to add up on CC, you're going to add up, like if you put a 1 or a 2, a 3, or 4, or 5, right? So, it'll be like, here, I'll do it like this. Thank you, honey. So, CC, and you have all your answers, right? You have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And you scored yourself. You scored yourself a 1 for number 1. You scored yourself a 5. You scored yourself a 3, 2, 3, 0. And then we're going to total your answers for CC. So you're going to say, CC, I got 20 points. And SS, I got 12. And we're gonna pick the top 2 of these 6 money types. And they'll help you understand you. And sometimes it brings out other people in your life, like someone you're dating or your parents. Yeah. Overall. Yeah, overall. Okay. I know I talked during that. We'll come back to that if we need to. Oh. Here we are. I charge or get paid less than I'm worth. Or I give away my time too freely. Who is it that I was just talking to that I said, maybe you need to learn how to say no? It's so hard for some people. And for other people are like, why is that so hard? If you're having a hard time, you can come up to the front if you want to, just for this part, you're welcome to. I think this one is a lot of people in ministry, this money type right here. Keep an eye on the front row to see how far you guys are. Okay, are we about done? I know a few people I see done. if you're having a hard time keeping up, do the top 1 through 3 and then do 6 through 8. Just do like 3 of each category. That'll give you a good idea. Okay, next one. DD. Here we are, DD. Yeah, you can take a picture, edit it, circle on your phone the numbers. Whatever you want to do is fine. Don't overthink it. Are you doing this, George? I do know your money type. If you get done early, you can tally your category of for your totals. I didn't notice I didn't tally this because 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. I see a few people looking up here. Looks like we're getting close. Okay, AA, this is the last one. And it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, it is not AAA. Okay, I'm going to go back to the first one. We can go back, right? We can go back. I thought, what did I do wrong? Hold on, technical difficulties. So we're back to SS. It's a big step for me. I had 2 knee replacements last year, so still healing. I'm not going to do that much more. I'll stay down there with you guys. Okay. Is everyone done with SS? Who's not done? Okay, great. No problem. We'll leave it a couple more minutes. So if you're done with SS, be sure to tally your answers, total them, add them together. You can use your calculator if you want to. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm a financial advisor and I use calculators a lot. Okay. Are you guys about done now? Okay. Okay, let's just flip through to CC. Anybody still finishing CC? Okay, no problem. Okay, we done? Okay. Oh. Oops, get the big one. I think DD is next. Okay, everyone done with OO? Not quite? No worries. I think you can kind of tell that there's no one that is right or wrong if you haven't noticed, right? There's not, this one's ethical. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about that. That's George's problem. I mean, it's George's area. Okay, let's move on to DD. Everyone still has some on DD? Everyone's done? Done? Okay. And AA. And total. Everyone done with AA? Okay. Total your score. No, thank you. I'll just get thirsty. No, that's okay. This is the last time I'm going up. I'm just gonna we're gonna score you guys, and then I'll be done up there. This is all I need. It's right here. Okay. Okay. Now, circle the top two, the highest scoring money type. So you're gonna just circle the top two. Okay? Okay. I see some people still calculating on their phones unless they're texting somebody. I'm assuming you're calculating. Okay, so this front row, since you guys are done, what was your top two?
CC and OO.
Okay. Next.
OO and CC.
Okay. Oh, wait. Not SS. Sorry. You said CC, right? And OO. Okay.
Same.
Okay. No wonder you guys are all friends.
OO and SS.
I cannot even read this.
Always the same.
Okay. This is 4. Okay.
DD and OO.
OO and A. Okay. Gracie, are you done?
Yeah. CC and OO. CC and OO. AA and SS.
Okay.
OO and SS.
Dana. Okay. OOCC. Okay.
OO and SS.
I love my DDs. They're special. Okay. Seriously, in a good way.
CC and AA.
Did you? Either of you? Yeah.
CC and OO.
Okay. We see a trend. Right? You are very generous. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly go over all of these, but we might spend a little bit more time on these because that's the vast majority of you. And then all of you DDAAs and SS, you can sit with me later and we can talk about you if you want. Okay, so let's see what these are. Okay, Spendthrift Sally. Cheap chip. Lots of cheap chips here. Because you're being too generous, probably. So you, you give too much away and then you have nothing left, maybe. I don't know. Delusional Dans and Avoider Al. Gender makes no significance. It's just whatever rhymed the best. And we wanted to be inclusive, right? So that's, so now you're like, okay, maybe that makes sense. I'm not quite sure. But so your money type, we already did this. You already circled it. You already kind of know, so that's good. And then let's just review. Let's just talk a little bit about it. I'm going to pull up my notes on, I like to have as many technology projects. So let's start with cheap chip. Cheap chip. Anyone want to share any thoughts on cheap chip, or shall I just start? Any of you cheap chips out here? Or maybe you're not and you're dating a cheap chip, maybe. That might be a challenge. But anyway, cheap chip loves a good discount. I mean, if there's not a coupon, they won't do it, right? My mom taught me to be a cheap chip. When we came home from shopping, we would say, Dad, guess how much we saved? That was it. Just guess how much we saved. And that was, my dad was a pastor, right? So you get it, right? Doesn't really like to spend money. Gets a little anxious about it at times. Like, I'm not sure about this. There's a belief system that you may not have enough. You might lose something. These are people that have a hard time investing in the stock market because they're afraid to lose anything, okay? So to tie to financial planning, I see cheap chips that are usually married to Spendthrift Sallies. Spendthrift Sallies buys impulsively, a lot. What is it called? Shopping therapy? No, something. Right? Okay. She does it for comfort, not necessarily because she needs them, but if you're depressed, you'll go shopping. If you're celebrating, you go shopping. I tend to do that going out to dinner instead of shopping, but that's another problem to have. So got the cheap chip, got the Spendthrift Sally. Over generous Olivia tends to be spiritually okay because she thinks that, I'm going to get more love. I'm going to be more accepted oftentimes. Money is evil. A lot of times it's there, and I'm using these extreme statements, so you're not going to be that extreme, but these are just some of the belief systems that often are there. There's a scripture about the root of money is money is the root of all evil. It's actually not the money it's the love of money. So just to clarify. She's giving stuff away, always giving, giving, giving. Either of your time, either of your money, whatever it is, right? So, and I said this is super common in ministry. We don't take care of ourselves, and that's a problem. That's why pastors, the average pastoral stint at a church is 5 years. So where are they going? Well, they're burning out. They literally are burning out because there's so much expectations and there's no ability for them to say no. That's where George and I are different. Anyway, so DD, all my DDs out there, delusional Dans. Delusional. You know, he's like, hey, nothing's going to happen to me. The way the church says this is, I have the gift of faith. I have the gift of faith. I don't need to plan. I don't need to live on a budget. I don't need to do all that kind of stuff. God's going to take care of me, you know? And is that true? Yes, right, to some extent. But it does not preclude our responsibility, right, to be responsible. So oftentimes, you know, they might be in debt, they might not be barely getting by, and then they need help, and then the overgenerous Olivia helps them out, and there's this big old cycle, right? And then there's the avoider Al. Stick your head in the sand, people. Totally get it. I have clients like that. I have clients that have brought in envelopes of their 401k statements or whatever, and they haven't even been opened for years. They're like, yeah, I don't know what to do with these. I just don't even open them. I don't even want to look at it. I'm like, okay, that's avoider Al. You know, like, I'm going to get started soon, but there's always something that comes up, and I'd rather just not deal with it because it makes me uncomfortable, you know, those kinds of things. So that's the avoider Als. So what have you learned about yourself today? Anyone want to share? Or is this is like confirmation of something you kind of knew, or is it something like, oh my gosh, I had no idea? That's probably the delusional Dan's in here. Yeah.
I'm a delusional Dan, but not in the way of where I think like I don't budget anything and I just think God's gonna take care of it. I budget everything and I have like all my finances down, but I believe that like no matter what happens, God's gonna take care of me. So that's why.
Well, that's not, I would not say that's a delusional Dan, because that's the delusional part of it, right? So you are being responsible with your money. So, and that's where, and that comes out in, you know, in a lot of these areas. These are kind of the money types as far as how we view and think about money. So you view and think about money in a good way. You know it's there, it's a tool, right? But then when we get in a space, what is our natural inclination? It's similar to like a personality test, right? We might be an extrovert, but we may not be an extrovert to the extreme. There's going to be different levels of you know, kind of on the spectrum of who we are. So, you know, I think that that's a good thing, and there's nothing wrong with being generous. There's nothing wrong with spending money. There's nothing wrong with, well, there is something wrong with avoidance. So you're not avoiding because you're dealing with it, right? So it's, yeah. And, you know, I think that it's kind of, I mean, if you look, the New Testament has a lot of things to say about money, and George and I decided I wasn't going to get into that, so I'm happy to have any conversations about that offline. But the Old Testament does too, but the Old Testament is very, very specific on taking care of your family and your responsibility and stewardship and, you know, all those kinds of things. We think of stewardship in our New Testament perspective of giving, right? We're being a good steward, maybe so that we can tithe or whatever. So those are just some other thoughts. Anyone else want to share anything? And all you people that I know your name, you're like, oh shoot, she knows my name. Confirmation? Yeah. And it's just like in a personality type, right? It's not like it's you and it's going to be you forever. It's areas that we can grow in and that we can change in, and, you know, all of those kinds of things. And so I just thought this would be a good kind of fun, interactive thing to kind of evaluate and take home with us, because we're going to get home, or we're going to stay here, and we're going to get a job, and we're going to figure out what we're going to do with life, right? So having a basic understanding of what are our tendencies is really important, so that we can understand that. Okay? Anything else? George, you want to add anything? No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into the good stuff. I'm such a nerd when it comes to money. Sorry about that. No, this is, so I do this presentation, I literally do this on Zooms all the time, every day with my clients. It doesn't matter if they are in your position where you're just starting out and you maybe barely have 2 nickels to rub together or whatever, right? Or there's the 55-year-olds that, have $2 million and they're like, do I have enough? And it's like, okay, but let's think about saving. So I thought this would be a really good foundation for you guys. I just went over this with my own kids. I'm actually doing a Zoom with all of my nieces and nephews, and I'm going to share this with them. So it is I think, a very good perspective. We already talked a little bit at lunch about Roth IRAs and some different things, so we're going to get into a little bit of that. I would love for you to just, if you have questions, just raise your hand. We're not going to do the wait till the end. No, we're not going to do that. So if you have questions or if you want to comment or something, is totally fine. Sound good? Okay. So first of all, we have to lay a foundation. The challenge is, if any of you end up going into like corporate America or whatever, if you get a full-time job, HR is going to give you a package and say, fill this out, right? And you're going to be like, I don't know what to fill out. What am I supposed to do, right? They're like, oh, you got to start putting money into the retirement account. Oh, you got to do that, and blah blah blah. And we match. And so if you don't, you're just giving away free money. This is what you will hear. But the reality is, if you are 19 and you put money in a retirement account, you cannot touch it till you're 59 and a half. So, of course, I'm a retirement planner, but for people just starting out, we got to lay a foundation. We need to have an emergency fund, and that emergency fund needs to be liquid, which means accessible without any penalties, right? So that would be a basic savings account. Now, when you get enough in there and you might want to invest some of it, that's fine too, but you start by saving. Ideally, well, we're going to talk about that later. I'm going to get ahead of myself. So laying a foundation. Emergency fund, college fund. We're talking about your college fund for your kids. So that's kind of down the line. So we'll skip over that one. And then your midterm fund, if you want to buy a house someday, or if you want to travel Europe for a year, that might be a midterm fund, right? And then your long-term goal, last on the list, is retirement planning. I'm not saying that you should wait that long. I'm saying we add it in over time. Like for the first year or two, you're going to do A, maybe B and C are kind of middled together. So then the next few years you do that, and then you really get down to retirement planning, ideally by the time you're 30. Because if you start by the time you're 30, you will have enough compounding interest if you're putting money away to probably have $1 million by the time you retire. If you wait much longer, so if you're in your 20s and 30s, you only have to put away about $300 a month to have $1 million by the time you're 65. Invested conservatively. If you wait till you're 50, which I have plenty of people waiting till they're 50, they have to put aside $5,000 a month. So do you want to save $300 or $5,000 a month, right? I mean, it's much easier to start with, and it's 300. Now, it's easier to start with 50, right? So you guys have, is there a weight room here too? Just the basketball, and okay. So let's just say, what is it, basketball? You run lines? Is it lines? Or what are burpees or whatever they're called, all those exercise things. I don't do that anymore, sorry. But anyways, let's just say you're out there and you're doing laps, right? The first time you go in there, you're gonna maybe do 1 or 2, but then every week, if you add a couple laps, right? And that's what savings is. It's building that muscle, building that repetitive motion so it becomes natural for you. So if you start with $10 a month, start with $10 a month. That's it. I know it just seems like it's silly, but it's part of muscle. And then maybe every month add $5. Add $5 the next month. And if you set it up automatically to, if you are even part-time, doesn't matter, you get a paycheck, you set your bank automatically to move $10 a month to a savings account. If it's automatic, it won't be painful. Well, maybe it will at the first month or so, but maybe not. Okay, so these are the categories that we're going to talk about. Risk. How much risk should we be under? Where should we save? Like a retirement account or where? Where? Liquid, access to money, and amount. How much should you save? So those are 4 things we're going to go over today. Okay? So where? Asset location. So these are supposed to be buckets. They kind of look like buckets. They might be those, what are those dumbbells that you, yeah, what is it? Picnic basket, right. Okay, so a lot of people don't really understand these, so I'm going to explain them. We're going to start with the middle one, tax deferred. Tax deferred. That means the IRS is allowing you to not pay tax on this bucket of money, but eventually you're deferring it to the future. Eventually you will have to pay tax on it. And not just on the money that you put in, but also on the growth. Okay, so I had a client that had a gal that came up after education thing, and she was a nurse. She was about ready to retire, and she's like, I have about $1 million in my 401k. I'm like, oh, that's great. You've done a great job. She goes, are you saying that all of that's going to be taxable? I'm like, yeah. So really, you only have about $600,000. Scary. She was not a happy camper. I'm like, sorry, don't shoot the messenger, right? So tax deferred is great and when you're young, because it puts more money in your pocket, because it's lowering your taxable income. Okay, so you have income, say you make $24,000 a year, it's $2,000 a month, and if you don't have any tax write-offs, you have a standard deduction of, right now it's $12,000, I think $12,000 per person. So they'll just take that right off the top, right? So that lowers your income to $12,000. So, but my point is that when you are young and you aren't in a really high tax bracket, this tax deferred bucket is not the best idea because you're in such a low tax bracket anyway. You don't want to, so if you think about it, in your retirement, if you save well and you have a good bucket of money when you retire, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket at that time than you are today. So it doesn't make sense to kick the tax burden down the road to when you're in retirement. Another thing about that, I put up there, if anyone wants to sit together at breakfast, these are some other topics that have come up this week. Housing allowance. Anyone know what housing allowance is in here? Okay, so when you are a pastor, the IRS allows you to have part of your income deemed as housing allowance. That means it's tax-free to you. So say you make $50,000 as a pastor and your mortgage and all your living expenses are $10,000 a year, then you're only taxed on the 40. So that money, the housing allowance, comes to you tax-free. Okay, what that does is it decreases your tax ramifications. So you're in a lower tax bracket. So people love that, right? So if you're in ministry, usually it needs to be in a church setting. You can have a housing allowance. What that does is it, again, makes the tax deferred bucket less appealing because in retirement, there's usually no housing allowance, right? Because you're retired at that point, right? So think about that. So that's tax deferred. Any questions on tax deferred? Okay. Taxable. Everyone's like, ooh, taxable. All that means is it's just like if you have money in a savings account and at the end of the year, you'll get this 1099 DIV dividend or at a credit union. It's basically the growth on that savings account. And it might be like, sometimes it's like $1.50, sometimes it's like $10. It's not very much because savings accounts don't earn much, but you get that at the end of the year and you have to give that to your CPA and they add it to your taxable income. So that taxable account is, you're putting after-tax money into it, so money that comes out of your net income, right? So you got your gross, that's what your total income is. Say if you make $20 an hour, that's your gross, and then boom, 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 the feds and state get in there and take a little bit, and then you have your net income. So it's really what you put in your pocket is your net income, okay? So in a taxable account, you put money in from your net income. So all that money's already been taxed, and the government is not going to tax it again. But every year, as it grows, you will just pay tax on the growth. So what that means in 20 years is you'll have a bucket of money that's tax-free at that point, right? And so that's a good thing. So if we have $100,000, no, let me start over. If we have a big old bucket, some in taxable and some in tax deferred, right? And we want to maximize our retirement income, then we can just pull a little bit from both, right? Instead of pulling it all from the tax deferred, where all of it will be taxable. So you can see how where you save is almost just as much important as how much you save. Last one, tax advantaged. Here is your Roth IRA. Here is whole life insurance. Here is 529s. Here are our municipal bonds. We're not going to get into all of those, but the reality is you are putting money in, again, after tax from your net income. And it's called advantaged because there's special tax treatment that the IRS affords for those types of accounts. So as it grows over time, as long as you do it according to the rules and stay within the right rules of the IRS, when you pull the money out, 100% tax-free. It's called tax advantage. It's not tax-free because the money you put in had already been taxed, but the growth is never taxed. So you can see if you get to retirement with 3 different buckets, how advantageous it can be, right? So contributing to a Roth, great. 529, those are college savings funds, but they are tax advantaged as long as you use it for educational experience. It's not even only college anymore. 529s can be used for K through 12 private school these days, all kinds of things. So, any questions on this concept? Yes.
I think you said it, but what's an example of a tax deferred?
Okay, a tax deferred is a 401k, 403b, an IRA. IRA is individual retirement account. The 403s and the 401s, those numbers don't mean anything. It's just a section of tax code. But the section of tax code is determining the rules on the 401k. So those are usually employer-sponsored plans. So if you get a job, and that's where HR comes in and says, here's your packet of information. I have sat down with all of my kids and my in-laws and my daughters-in-law, well, not my, anyway, yeah, all of them, and help them fill out their employer paperwork at open enrollment, because no one teaches you this. No one teaches you. It's irritating to me. So that would typically be your employer plan. If you are not working and you don't have an employer plan and you have income, you can start an IRA. You can start your own. You can go onto Schwab account, online, all those online places that you could just open an IRA. There's maximums of how much you can put in. This year it's $7,000 a year. They give you a catch-up when you get to 50 because they know, remember what I said about 50-year-olds, if they haven't already saved, they're in trouble. So they give you an extra $1,000 a year so you can put in $8,000 when you're 50. So there's just all those different rules. If it's an employer-sponsored plan, you can put in $23,000 a year. So employer-sponsored plans are very beneficial. So good question. Did I answer that? Okay. Let's look at the ramifications of these. Okay, am I in your way? I'm going to just stand over here for a minute. This is just a comparison. So like I was mentioning, I'm going to just zoom right into this one. So the Smiths on the left saved everything in tax deferred. The Joneses saved half and half, tax deferred, tax advantaged. So they both need $150,000 of income a year. They certainly do not live in California, because that would be difficult. But let's just say that they live somewhere else. So the Smiths have to take everything from their 401k. The Smiths are like that nurse that talked to me and saved everything in her 401k. So you take out 150, it immediately puts you in a potential, a specific, that's the word, federal income tax bracket. We're going to have to even talk about state tax because not every state has taxes. But again, if you lived in California, you'd have another at least 10% there gone. So 22% income tax bracket, so that means the taxes they owed are about $25,000. Okay, so they have income, after-tax income in your pocket net. Remember that net? I kind of think of the guys' bathing suits that have those pockets that have net, you know, if you can't remember which one's which. So they got $125,000. Now the Joneses, because they talked to somebody early and heard this concept of tax advantage, and they said, whoa, well, we should do this. And they saved a little bit in both. So when they need 150, they can take 75,000 from each bucket. The bucket on the right, the tax-free Roth, there are Roth 401ks, didn't get into that, but there are. They can take 75,000 out of there, they can take half of it and have no tax at all. Completely legal, just clarifying. On the left side, the taxable 401k, so they're gonna take just 75,000 out, which puts them instantly in a lower tax bracket, right, from 22 to 12, and it's only 12% on that 75,000. So you can see the tax difference, 8,500 compares to 25,000. And all it took was a little bit of intentionality when they started to save, of what kind of bucket you want to save in. It's not rocket science, it's starting young. Starting young, people, because if you get to a point where you've got $1 million in tax deferred, it's very hard to diversify at that point. Also, there are rules on all those tax advantage buckets, like Roths. If you have an individual Roth and you make a certain amount of money, you are not even allowed to contribute. The IRS says, nope, you make too much money. We want your tax, so we're not going to give you that benefit. Okay? So that's why I say when you're young, having a Roth IRA is great, because there might be a point where you can't contribute. Now, there are Roth 401ks starting to become popular, and that income restriction does not exist. So if you're looking for a job and you're interviewing and such, and they ask them, what are your benefit package look like? What does it look like? I talk to people all day long. Okay, you have a 401k. Do they have a Roth option? I don't know. Okay, could you go back to HR and find out? Because it's a really good thing, and if you do, we should do it. All the time. People that have been working at the same company for 20 years, they have no idea. So find out the benefits, because it's super, super important. Okay, that was just location, asset location. I don't know if you ever heard anybody say asset allocation. Asset allocation is how it is invested, how aggressive, how conservative. Asset allocation. Asset location, pretty much no one talks about. Okay, so risk. How many of you think you can tolerate a good amount of risk? Like, yeah, good. Okay, so like, name? Ezra. I knew it was similar to my son's, Elias, but I couldn't remember. So Ezra, let's just say that you had $50,000 in an investment account. If you saw it and it lost 5,000, would you panic and want to get out? There's no wrong question. No. Okay. Everyone else, think about that. You got 50,000. If you lose 5, until you take the money out, that loss is really only on paper, right? Because, and this is another advantage of starting when you're young, because if you can say, I don't really need that money, I'm just going to let it ride, and it grows back, right? So the risk thought concept, I think I see this regularly, changes over time, depending on where you're at. Now, there are some people that are so risk averse, I have to encourage them to go a little bit more risky sometimes. Because if their life, because they might be, one of those money types that, is, what was the one that was worried about? Avoider Al, I think it was Avoider Al, that was worried about losing money, right? So, when we look at and we categorize assets in 2 different categories, and this is our firm's copyrighted, trademarked material as far as market-based assets versus promise-based, okay? So market-based is kind of what it sounds like. it is open to some kind of risk, right? So if I had a house and I was going to sell it to Ezra, did I get that right? Okay. I said it and I'm like, I'm going to sell this house to Ezra. And in my mind, I had it appraised and I already know it's worth $500,000 and not in California again. But Ezra says, I'll give you $450,000. And I'm like, okay. So that is the actual value of the house. It doesn't matter what it's appraised for. It matters what somebody will pay for it, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys have tried to like sell a surfboard, a used something or whatever. It's, you know, Facebook, whatever it's called, and marketplace, that's the word, yeah. You know, I know you guys probably don't use Facebook a lot, but you know, you've got eBay and all those places where you can just put stuff up for sale, right? So you then determine your level of acceptance of that bid, and really that's what determines the value. So market-based assets. So if we think about them, we're looking at stocks primarily. Stocks are part ownership of that company. Coca-Cola. They issue stocks. They are what are called publicly traded. You can go buy a share of Coca-Cola stock, which means technically you are part owner in that company, okay? I just wanted to explain the market-based side of things a little bit more clearly. Now, on the promise-based side, these are investments with a guarantee. So, savings account. Right? It's not much, but you're never going to lose you're never going to lose what you put in. You're never going to lose the growth. It's promised. It's guaranteed. And there's not very many of those. They're harder to find. CDs, certificates of deposits, not compact discs. So, you know, those are a bank product. They have guarantees as long as you do them with the same rule. Okay. So, here are some examples. The blue side are market-based assets, and the green are guaranteed or promise-based assets. I could take like 10 minutes on each of these explaining them, so I'm not going to, but I gave you the two examples are, okay, so they use, oh yeah, stocks, there it is, stocks right down there. And corporate bonds, which means if you, like, have you guys ever voting? Are you guys voting age? Not yet, huh? Okay. Well, when you're at voting age, there's oftentimes a ballot option for a bond to be issued. Maybe it's for like the new playground equipment at the local elementary school, right? And a bond is basically a loan. Did you know that? So instead of a stock where you're buying part of the company, in a bond you're loaning that entity money. And they're going to pay you a coupon rate, which is kind of like an interest rate, and at the end of the term, they'll give you your money back. So, but they're guaranteed if you hold it until the term of the bond expires. So those are good, right? So, so that's some of those market-based, promise-based. Yeah.
For like CDs, are there CDs that exist that aren't like taxable?
Typically, no. However, the ones that would make sense would be treasuries that are held to maturity. If you, or some of the bonds, so I mentioned early municipal bonds. So municipal bonds are bonds that are distributed through a municipality, so kind of a city, county kind of a thing, right? And it's usually for some kind of a local type of a thing, right? So a lot of times if you're earning money on those, then the growth will be tax-free. Usually federal, sometimes state. So there's a lot of maybes in our industry, or it depends, but yeah, so that's one of the ones that you can do. This cash value in whole life insurance is another one that is very, very misunderstood by many people. But it is a great way to save, and on top of that, you've got a death benefit if you die. So, and it's the death benefit and the cash value is all tax-free. A lot of people that cannot contribute to a Roth anymore because either they make too much money, that's where they put their money, in the cash value life insurance. Okay, liquidity, show me the money, right? So this is like super important because remember those 4 steps at the beginning? If you start by putting money like in that retirement account, you can't access it. And I talk to people all the time in their 50s and 60s that are like, yeah, when the stock market went crazy in 2000, the dot-com bubble, and then the 2008, I had to pull out my money from my 401k. They got federally taxed state and a 10% penalty. So the IRS made out really well on their lack of having an emergency fund, right? So let's talk about amount. How much should you save, right? So this is just an example. We can just pretend like it's a dual income. Study of 20 years, $200,000 dual income with a 4% annual rate increase. That might be a little high these days, but you know, you're not even keeping up with inflation right now at 4%. But if you look at it, right, if you were able to save every penny of everything you made, you're gonna have $6 million in 20 years. It's pretty cool, right? But we can't save everything because we have to live. We have to get our nails done, you know, we gotta go surfing. Okay, so this is what most Americans save. Most Americans save 5%. So if you save 5%, same exact scenario, you have almost $300,000, 20 years. And if you think about it, by then you're probably making easy $150,000 a year. How long is that gonna last in retirement? 300,000. No, it's not enough, right? And so we don't want you to save 5%. We want to save 5% this year and maybe 10% the next year and then 15 the next year. Got it? So don't be like, I can't even save 5%. It's okay, right? The whole thing is for you to be intentional. Save 1%. 1%. No biggie. Your bank's going to be like, but if you have more, it's going to be, you know, no fees or whatever. Don't let them stress you out. So what if we could get everyone to save ideally 20%? Okay, now you can think of 20% off of your gross, off of your net, whatever. I like to think of it as off of your net. You can think of it as after tithe, before tithe. We get into all these conversations in planning meetings. It's whatever you want to make it. Okay, I'm just saying 20% of any of those is going to be better than 5% of nothing, right? So if you save 20%, you'll have 1.1 million. Just saving 15% more. All the parameters exactly the same. So that's why 20% is super, super important, right? It's not necessarily the rate of return, but that's what everyone talks about. It's what everyone in my industry talks about. That's how people steal clients from other financial advisors is, oh, you only got 6%? I could get you 8. You know, and I'm like, whatever. No one has a crystal ball. If they did, they would be the billionaires, right? Warren Buffett, maybe. But you know why? You know why I read an article about Warren Buffett? He started saving when he was 14 because he had a paper route. And how old is he now? I don't know. Anyone know how old he is? Honey, Google how old is Warren Buffett. Anyway, he's been saving for like probably 60 years. So he can do whatever he wants with his money. He can go super aggressive because he knows he has plenty, right? And so you cannot liken yourself and try to follow somebody if you're not really understanding all that they did. He started probably saving at least 20% when he was 14. I didn't even start that. So, summary. It's just a little chart. I know you guys like my little icons. So, if you look at the legend, the market-based assets are the little squiggly lines. The promise assets are the black dots, and the liquid are the teardrops. So this is when I'm working with a client, this is my grid. This is one of my really important grids. How much do they have in taxable? How much do they have in tax deferred? How much in tax advantaged? How much risk? Look at all the ones in tax deferred that are squiggly. That's a lot of market risk right there, right? You know, how many are promised? Look at the dots that are promised. Not very many, but there are some, right? And how many that are liquid? We want to look at all the ones that aren't liquid. Yikes, right? Almost all of the tax deferred ones that we have there are not liquid. So it's just a kind of a grid, a rubric, is what George called it in college, I don't know, of how he grades papers and such. But this is how I grade my clients, in a sense, right? To help them understand what we are looking at when we're looking at their overall situation. Any questions on this? No? Does it make sense? It's not really complicated. It just takes a little bit of intention, right? Yeah. When my son got his first job, he works for JPL, and he's given me permission to share his story. He works for JPL, and he said, Mom, should I start putting into my 403B? And he said, JPL puts in money for me anyway. Like, I don't even have to. So they put in like 5%. I'm like, no, don't put money in there. Put it in a savings account. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And then we talked about a Roth. I said, Roths are great. I think that's a great idea. And I said, well, let's look at all of the tax advantaged buckets. So all of the far right, right? He doesn't have a kid. He's not going to save for college. He could do a Roth. Municipal bonds, they're a little bit more tricky as far as that goes. You can do that, but there's some disadvantages I won't go into right now. And then we have the cash value life insurance. So I ran numbers for him. I said, look, if we put it in a Roth, and you can put in, back then it was $6,000 max. If you can put in $6,000 max to this Roth IRA, and we invest it at blah, 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 and we have an average rate of return after tax, well, there's no tax, so average rate of return about 6%, 7% maybe. And then if we take that same amount of money and put it in whole life insurance, what would it look like? And a lot of people think, well, of course the market is going to way outperform and all that kind of stuff. And no, it doesn't. And the reality is all of this bucket, 100% guaranteed. All of this bucket, 100% risk, right? And so, and then if you think about it, like if he died after contributing 1 year, I'll say 1 year. So the whole $6,000 1 year into a Roth, at the end of the year he died. If he did that in the whole life insurance, at the end of the year, he died, and his beneficiary would get $400,000. On the Roth side, the beneficiary would get $6,000, or maybe with a little growth, maybe $6,500. So when we are looking at different financial vehicles for people, we're looking at optimizing the amount that you're contributing to make it do as much for you as possible, right? And to give you as much flexibility. If you remember the Jones and was Smith and the Jones, right? How they had the 2 different buckets. One had only 401k, one had Roth and after tax. So we're looking at how can we optimize what you can do, even if it's just a little bit. Like my son, he's like, well, yeah, I want to do the whole life insurance. And then the pandemic hit, and he's like, well, my 403B just really tanked. I'm like, yep. He goes, but my life insurance hasn't gone down at all. I'm like, no, you're good. You're good. Don't have to worry about that. So it's kind of, I like it to think of the promise-based assets. I don't know. Will you guys have you ever been to Cirque du Soleil? Anyone? You've seen it on, Okay, so if you think about people, that are doing all that stuff, they're, obviously very well trained, but they have safety nets. They have backups. They've got stuff going on. The promised assets are the backup, the safety net to your market-based assets. And when you're young, I encourage people, go aggressive, as long as you don't need the money. Like, don't go aggressive in your emergency fund, right? Don't necessarily go aggressive in the amount you're saving for a house that you're going to need in 3 years, right? So you just have to understand, you can maybe be comfortable with a lot of risk, but certain accounts maybe you don't want to be super risky. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions? Thoughts? Any words I use that you didn't understand? No? How are we doing, hon? We're good, huh? Okay. Any other topics that you would like to address? We can talk a little bit about these ones if you want, or anything about, preferably about money, or money goal setting, or the stock market, or what was it, The Big Short? If you saw The Big Short, all the stuff that's out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The way I understood it is that you go through like a advisor or something, and they put your money into different stocks or big companies. Is that correct?
Great question. So a mutual fund is usually about 800 to 1,000 different stocks and bonds kind of into a fund. Okay? So what it does is it gives you a lot of diversity, right? Because it can be all different kinds in there, right? They have different mutual funds that are weighted to be more risky or more conservative, right? And so so it's a good way to get access to a lot of different investments. The challenge with them, there's two challenges. Number one, there are some upfront fees that can get expensive on those. Usually, like if you put in $10,000, 5% of that is a fee that's taken right off the top. Okay? So, but there's fees everywhere, right? So there's fees everywhere. But then the other side of it is that the mutual funds aren't managed on a regular basis. Like they have mutual fund managers. Like so, I say I'm a manager of this particular mutual fund, and I have people watching all of the little stocks and everything that are inside that mutual fund. They're not changing them out and putting new ones in on a regular basis. So it's what we call passively managed. It's passive in its management. Then there are different kinds of more portfolio managers with strategies. That the strategies, they're not mutual funds, but they're strategies and they buy into a bunch. So it's similar to mutual funds, but they're actively managed. So that if they see that, my mind goes blank, but say something happened and Coke goes, I always like to rag on Coke too. Coca-Cola takes a dip and they're like, well, let's just pull out of that for now. We'll put something else in there and then maybe we'll go back in. So they're doing that for us instead of doing our own day trading. Like I don't do individual stock trades because you kind of have to be doing it 24/7 if you're going to do that. Plus you have to get up really early because the stock market opens in New York really early. It'd be like super early in Hawaii. But so that's kind of the difference between mutual funds and individual stocks or investing in strategies that have stocks and bonds and such in a mix. Usually in a mutual fund, we talk a lot in investment risk in percentages. So like oftentimes when you're really young, you might go 80% stocks and 20% bonds, which is going to be a lot more risky because you have 80% in stocks, right? And then over time, maybe you're getting closer and closer to retirement. And like I'll see people and I'm like, you say you want to retire in 2 years, but you're like 80% stocks right now. What happens if in the next 2 years something happens, right? You're going to have to work longer. You're not going to be able to retire. So they're like, oh, okay, let's change that, right? So over time, a lot of times, in that market-based, promise-based, we start off maybe 80-20, and then in year 35 or year 40, when you're 40, you maybe go 70-30, then maybe you go a little bit more conservative as you're getting closer to retirement to like 60-40 and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the asset allocation. More than what you asked, so sorry. Anyone else? Anyone like, I can't even think about this because I'm leaving and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life.
I took a finance class in high school.
Mhm.
Something my teacher always told me, he still texts me about every once in a while, is investing like in the stock market when it's low and go out when it's high. Is that something you suggest or have any other questions?
So first, the concept is yes, 100%. If you can, like when, after the pandemic, I had a couple clients call me and say, this would be a really good time to buy in, right? I'm like, yeah, we're down like 40%. That's the time. If there are certain circumstances in life that happen and the market has crashed first time, that is a great time to get in. The challenge with that's what we call timing the market. The challenge is knowing when you want to get out. Because then people start getting like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's been going up. It's still going up. Should I do it now? And then it might go down a little bit. They're like, oh, no, I'm going to wait for it to go back up. And then it goes down a little bit more. And then, so the hard thing, it's easier to time it when you're getting into it because you can see what's going on. It's more after the fact. But it's much more difficult to time it when you want it to be at the top. And if anyone could do that, they would be a gazillionaire. So the reality is no one can really do it. Financial advisors like to claim they can, or all that kind of stuff, but it's really, really difficult to do. Some people just accidentally do it, and they're like, yes. I'm like, great, do it again. Do it 10 times in a row, and then we'll be celebrating, right? So just so you know, I forgot to say this up front. I am life and health and disability and long-term care insurance certified, and I have my Series 6, 63, 65, and 7 for securities licenses. So it was a lot of studying, a lot of testing, but what it does is it makes me able to look at all product, all different structures, everything for my clients. I'll end with one other little thing that I love. Okay, so my first career was in marketing and fundraising for nonprofits. And I think I mentioned that earlier. So I am super passionate, and this was what got me into this industry, is charitable strategies for donors. Anyone think they might go into working in a nonprofit? Maybe? Anyone? Do you know what a nonprofit is? Okay. So, it might be, anyway, so American Red Cross, that's a big one, right? And then you got the Kauai Christian Fellowship, right? They're a nonprofit. So there are ways to give to nonprofits that are not cash, that are really cool. You can gift stock, right? You can do that. You can gift property. And the IRS gives you some really, really amazing opportunities of reducing your taxes. So let's just say that someone has a condo here on Kauai and they bought it 20 years ago, and they bought it for like $200,000, and now it's worth $1 million. Okay, it's a rental. So that means if they sell it, they have to pay capital gains tax, which is federal. I don't know about Hawaii's state tax, but at least federal, on the growth. So 200 minus $1 million, so tax on that 800,000. It's painful. That's a big check you have to write. They don't just take it out of your paycheck, and then it's not as painful. But when you have to write a check that big, on that large amount of money. So this is one charitable strategy, and I think that you'll like this. So you could put this condo into a charitable remainder trust. When you put it in the trust, you get, in that year, a tax deduction for the future gift. So say you're gonna live another 30 years and then you're gonna die. At that time, a gift will be given to the charity that you determined originally, but you get the tax deduction in that current year, which is kind of cool, right? So you might have a reason for that. Then you sell it inside the trust and there's no tax, which is cool. So a property that has grown a lot in value, stock portfolios that have grown a lot in value, those types of things are great to use a charitable strategy, and you're basically passing on a legacy to your favorite charity, and you are helping yourself, rather than give the property to your kids, where maybe they're gonna have to pay the tax down the line eventually. There's lots of different ways to structure it, but those are some really cool kind of concepts of how financial planning and charities work together. So that's probably my favorite thing to do in my job. I don't get to do it as often as I'd like. But anyway, any questions? Any thoughts? We good? Was this helpful? I hope your silence is. Yes. Oh, George was.
How you talk about good debt versus bad debt?
Sure. Okay, so when we are purchasing something, that something is going to either appreciate, which means grows in value, or depreciate, which means loses value, right? And so any debt that goes towards an appreciating asset is, in broad strokes, good debt, okay? So that would be typically like a primary residence, rental properties, things that are going to grow in value. Things that are not going to grow in value, depreciate, New cars. It's an asset, but it depreciates. You buy a new car, as soon as you leave that lot, you've lost $10,000 of value probably, depending on what the, 10% of value, easy. So, and then it continues to depreciate over time. So when we look at that, we look at, a lot of people, there's a lot of people on the radio that talk about paying off your house, paying off your house, paying off your house. And, it's great if you can pay off your house, right? However, it's not bad debt. So we're going to prioritize paying off debt. We're going to start with bad debt. We're going to start with high interest rates, usually credit cards. We're going to start with, those types of things. Because if you have a credit card that is charging you 21% interest, that adds up over time, right? So it's really looking at where really should I be using other people's money. Debt is somebody saying, hey, you can, here, take $20,000. Just give me 20% back in addition, right? So if you think about that, using other people's money, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you are looking at an appreciating asset that's going to grow, that down the line you're going to be able to sell. Now, that whole capital gains tax on that rental property, different for primary residence. There's a federal capital gains exclusion, $250,000 per person. So if George and I sold our house, and it has grown a lot, if we sold our house, we have $500,000 of capital gains exclusion when we sell our primary residence. So that's why I just thought that might have been confusing to you. If it's a rental, it's different. If it's primary residence, it's different. Okay. So good debt, bad debt, I think anything. The other thing is prioritizing like student loan debt, right? You're investing in yourself. You're investing in your ability to make money, in your ability to earn an income, in your ability to change the world, whatever it is you're investing in. The challenge is these days is that student loan debt has just gotten so out of hand that it's very, very, very challenging. I have a lot of attorney clients that have $250,000, $300,000 of student loan debts, and it's a challenge. And so there's all kinds of nuances about student loans, but I don't think student loan debt in general, I would say that it's bad. I would say in general it's good, but everything good has to be in moderation, right? I mean, that's part of kind of our thing, right? I mean, so yeah, broccoli's good for us, but is that all we're going to ever eat, broccoli? No, that doesn't even make sense, right? So, all student loan debt is not the same. And so if it's what I call wealth building, if it's building wealth in your life by being able to make more money, being able to provide for your family, then I think nothing's wrong with debt. You also have to then look at the hedge, right? Like my son, he had a used car loan, and it was like 1.99% interest. It was from like 2017 or something. It was really low in interest. He's like, should I pay this loan off, Mom? I'm like, no, don't pay that loan off. It's like free money. It's so cheap. Like if you put your money and you invest it and you're getting 4%, then you're netting 2%, right? Because if you're taking if he had $5,000 left to pay off the loan, but he took $5,000 and put it in an investment account and it grew by 4 or 5%, and then he's only paying 1.9, the delta between those two percentages is the hedge, right? That's your net growth. So it's always, you're just looking for optimizing debt, optimizing growth, and how you can balance that and manage that. Was that helpful? Okay. Okay, guys, it's Friday. We're going to Kona next week. We're going to the Big Island. That'll be fun. So thanks for letting me come and chat. Happy to grab you at lunch or whatever and chat a little bit more, because I never get tired of talking about it. So. Do we just dismiss them? What do we do? Oh, yeah. Yes, one last worship song. I'm so excited. I love it. I was a worship leader for 20 years at my church, so it's totally cool. Okay. Get rid of this. You want to move this